Many of us live each day as it comes. But from time to time, we run into the question as to whether we'll have sufficient strengths, the right kind of strengths, to cope with whatever is in front of us. Many people see me in this capacity and in my other capacity, and many of them are continually challenged by this issue. Some come right out and say it. They do not have the strength of personality to be an effective teacher that they want to be, or they do not have the strength to be that model parent that they would like to be, or they do not have the kind of strength necessary to be a socially competent parent or person. Others swerve away from saying that they have a personality problem, but they know that they get into situations and they don't know what to say. They become their own worst enemy because they say too much. They become critical of themselves or maybe critical of other people without seeing that maybe they're not handling their strengths correctly or appropriately. I fear people, said one, I fear people are going to see my weakest points. And so I push myself so hard to show that I can do the task. But maybe I'm trying too hard, and then I wear myself out. Or I can't sleep at nights, frequently fearing what other people will think of me, and then fearing what I think of myself. We could go on naming various groups of people, various individuals of people. Some say, I've lost the strength I had. They've suffered some illness, some trauma, some catastrophe in life. Or maybe a succession of blows, traumas and stresses and illnesses and troubles knock the stuffing out of them. They want to find ways to get their strength back, and they struggle to do so. Another group, often amongst young people particularly, will say, I've never had the right kind of strength to feel comfortable in social situations. I don't have the right kind of strength that I need to do the job that one day I would like to do. So it's relationships, it's jobs, it's situations, not feeling comfortable, not feeling at ease, not feeling able, but more often feeling anxious and awkward. Sometimes overdoing their attempts to fit in, to show that they're all right, but often being very poor judges of themselves and often very poor judges of their social situations. And people within the community generally can be very unkind, sometimes quite ruthless. They say, don't be ridiculous. You can do it. Get out there and just do it. Stop behaving as if you're a psychological case. It's all in your mind. Just stop imagining things. We all have our stresses, and that's life. But I tell you, if you're on the receiving end of that kind of advice, it's not awfully helpful. So we need to listen again, perhaps, to see what we can say about the strengths we all need from time to time. It's quite interesting to note that some time ago I mentioned Dr. David Owen's book, his large volume, in which he discusses the personality difficulties and deficits of some of the major leaders, prime ministers and presidents of countries around the world. And it's rather discomforting, I suppose, to see how many of them have risen to such heights, and yet they've had such personality problems. You can go, of course, from Adolf Hitler to Idi Amin to Milosevic to Robert Mugabe to Richard Nixon to Margaret Thatcher to George W. Bush, and so the list goes on, from Abraham Lincoln to Winston Churchill. And you tend to stop and think, if all those people way up there can have these sort of problems, should we be so anxious that we have them? Perhaps we too can have them. But then when it comes down to the nitty-gritty, we've got to cope. every day with the issues of strengths and weaknesses. The science of human strengths comes to lift us out of our generalizations, our moralizations, our too ready advice, or even our intolerance, our lack or loss of sympathy. We need to stop for a moment and say, but what can we really say that's reliable and helpful? We do know this. Some people seem to have a comfortable way of being in the world from their earliest childhood. It seems that their strength is just there. Were they born with it? How did they get it? But they coast along as if nothing will disturb them. Others of us know that we have to learn our way through the many turning points and the many stressful times. Or sometimes we know that the loss of personality strengths and the feelings of inadequacy and insecurity affect us all, sometimes from the smallest children to the oldest person. And we have to negotiate those stresses right through our lifespan. The science of human strength says people are affected, but not all in the same way. And that often puzzles us. The young man at 20 says he feels clumsy and inept in social situations. The woman in her 50s had a father who told her she'd never be any good. There's a man who is strong on many fronts, but his wife says he is really a very weak person. Or there are the women who have angry words, make demands, insist on this and this and this, but behind that fence line of rigidity, of dogmatism, of apparent strength, they're sometimes very fragile. Men who wish they could be stronger, but to be strong, they're overtaken by anxiety. So they succumb, and that too is anxiety. So they oscillate backwards and forwards in a time and a world of anxiety. Tennyson wrote these words, "Though much is taken, much abides. And though we are not now that strength which in old days moved heaven and earth, that which we are, we are. Will we leave it there, or will we do something more positive about it?" If you've lost your strength on one particular point in your life, there is a tendency to generalize that to the whole of your life. And so if you're not careful, you then give yourself a reading of total failure and total weakness when it was only one point. Better discrimination shows that you may be low in strength at that specific point, but it is not comprehensive. And that's critically important to keep ourselves in proper focus. We need to resist our own total disaster becoming, or one disaster becoming a total failure. But many of us do let that happen, and we become that, and so the collapse takes place. One man in his late 60s said his personality was damaged by his mother when he was 3 years of age, when she abandoned him at that stage. And so he claims he's remained weakened by that experience back there. Another man in similar circumstances said he was lucky in having such superb adoptive parents. So there we have the first part of it, to look at this overall picture of people being different and seeing where their strengths are and how they can mobilize those, how they do mobilize them or let them sink into nothingness. We have inferiority, we have insecurity, we have inadequacy. We have personalities that are shattered, unsteady, over-controlling. We have personalities searching for a lost mother, appeasing an abusive or demanding father. Personalities trying to grasp God's personality, mixed up with love and rage, with creativity and destruction, with caring for people and with disgust at ourselves. We see it. A person can be physically strong, highly achieving in mind and occupation. It can run emotionally out of control, or is overreactive, impulsive, can be spiritually well booked, but not at peace with their own inner spirit. People, any one of us, can have the many trophies of life on our shelves, but in the depths of our minds, slowly incubating our stress-inducing illnesses that will ultimately test every strength we can find. So having said to that point, let me now see what Scripture will contribute to the science of human strengths. 3 separate passages of Scripture today. Psalm 104, Hebrews chapter 11 and a little bit of chapter 12, and then St. Luke's story, St. Luke's chapter 10, two parts of the story, 2 questions. The psalm can push us to get all involved as to whether God created everything around us. Or will we rather see that passage saying, whatever interpretation you place upon the God in this picture that is given, see it all, that beautiful poem, see it all as one of the great givens of life. Get your anxieties and put them over there at one side for just a few moments. And let your life be comprehensively enhanced by what life has put before you in that magnificent poem. That's the first passage. The second passage says, you are surrounded by the host of those who've gone before us. See what they did in faith. And what will you do in faith? Just as Jesus, the symbol of the fulfillment of faith, put before us his concept of faith, what then will make your life such that you will be grasped by the fullest faith in yourself, by the fullest faith in what you've been given, by the fullest faith in the future which stretches before you? So the third passage, the passage of the 2 questions. What must I do to realize the fullness of my life? Question 1. And how shall I respond to the life that is in front of me? And the strength of the personality is given in the 2 answers and in 2 words. Or there are more words given, but just 2 words will do us today. One was the word love. You will love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, and with all your strength. But the critical word there is love. And the second was compassion. The story of the Good Samaritan, compassion. Now, love and compassion will take many forms in your life. But in the deepest depths of your mind, show the very best strength in all the expressions of your love and compassion. That's what it says. And the science of human strength then asks us the 2 questions. What kind of personality do you want? And what strength do you see emanating from your personality? What kind of personality? A flourishing personality, a compassionate personality, a personality in which the pathways and powers of love are far greater than the ever-present persuasions of aggression and hate. An enjoyable personality, comfortable with the world and life's panoramic gift. An open personality. It's so easy to close your personality down. An open personality rather than one which is dominated by fear and inadequacy that tends to make us go back into ourselves. A resilient personality, supported by the many pathways and people ahead of us and around us, by the many and generous strengths that are there for us. The science of human strength then tests those possibilities. We meet the person who feels inferior and lacking in the right strengths in social situations. We meet the person who feels their strengths have been shot to pieces and they need to rebuild. We meet the person who says they do not have the strengths to deal with the frustrations in their life, to cope with the multiple stresses in their life, or to live with adversity in their life. Some people have only one kind of strength for every stressful situation. That's not the science of strengths. That's too much of the global diffuse strength. So you might shout every time you're in stress. That's your strength, is it? Or you might become dogmatic, closed off. Or you might rely on the strength of worrying. Or you withdraw, that's your strength. Or you threaten people. You become violent, destructive. Or you call on other people to come in and join your negativity. Instead of saying, wait a minute, what is the stress? And what kind of strength is required for that kind of strength? Most often, we need to reduce. We need to reduce the fear and anxiety in our own mind. Fear and anxiety are not bludgeoned out of your life. They do not suddenly vanish because you shout and scream at people. They don't disappear on your demand. They too are part of life. And we need ways to reduce their power. We need to be on a pathway that is focused on reducing their power. We need to identify the resources that will reduce their power. And one sure way to reduce their power is to awaken a faith within us. A faith within us that there is a possibility that power of fear can be reduced. That power of anxiety can be reduced. If you've got that faith in that possibility, the very processes of therapy, for example, relies on that moment-to-moment faith that from low strength, from the damage of all your strengths, human strengths can recover. So it's important that we hear that, and thus, by that faith, strengthen the human spirit. Focus on the kind of personality you want. Do you want a personality that succumbs in a heap, or do you want a resilient personality, an enjoyable personality, an open personality, a compassionate personality, a flourishing personality? That is what we talk about today in the strengths, the science of strengths. To first of all focus on what kind of personality you want. See, the scriptures are also speaking in these terms. We need to select situations and relationships that are most likely to enhance you in your situation. Most likely, those situations and people that are most likely to be enhancing, inspirational, and fulfilling. Surely, if you choose situations which are not enhancing, not inspirational, not fulfilling, not enjoyable, then we need to look at that, don't we? You miss out on the whole point of what that new faith means. It means being grasped and shaped in life by what is given and by the fullest values and fullest expressions of love and compassion. So my views of our human strengths focus on just a handful of possibilities that can exert great force in your everyday life if you'll let it, if you'll be open to it. What we do with this handful of possibilities, how we learn about them, how we embrace them, is a matter for our continued openness of personality, our continued evolution of our personality, evolution of those strengths that we need, and it will lift us to be stronger personalities and stronger, better people. Would you please stand?